Okay, I have no idea what I did there, but we always have to have some kind of like little glitch
Yes,
to start off the program with.
Always something keeps it interesting.
People are like, I'm going to tune in today just to see how badly they screw up when they open the show. That's the reason why people tune in. Good morning, Julia. How are you?
Good. How are you? Lovely weather we're having.
Yes, we were just talking about the fact that we were talking, and yet we were not live. So you missed all of our discussion about the weather.
Yes.
Oh, well.
I want to say once again, though, that I am looking forward to talking to Senator Bullard. He is one of our favorites at the Capitol, for sure. For sure.
Well, we are going to bring him on here in just a second, and we will hear from him. And he doesn't have to go anywhere. He's already warned us. He doesn't have to, or told us he doesn't have to go anywhere. So we'll talk his ear off as long as we can get him. So I'm going to bring him on. Good morning, Senator Bullard.
Hey,
how are you this morning?
I'm doing good. I'm kind of like you. I'm enjoying the false August weather. So we'll find out.
Yeah.
There's a meme.
Up to 100 and something this afternoon. Who knows? But
yes,
for right now, it's lovely.
Have you guys seen the meme about it's like Oklahoma fall, then tornado season, then second Oklahoma fall, then it's like the funniest thing. And you're like, oh my gosh, that's so right about Oklahoma weather. It's just,
yes, you never know.
Well, the main rule here is you take it while you can get it, enjoy it. When I used to do landscaping and construction, this was always such a blessing to have this kind of weather come in. So we took advantage of it.
Okay, so you just said you did landscaping and construction. So yep. What was your last? What did you do for a living in your last incarnation?
So I've done a little bit of everything, but my last time that I was working was in a classroom. I was an AP U.S. History, AP Government, Constitution teacher for about 15 years.
So do you miss the classroom?
Very much. Yeah, we actually had a chance to go in and teach at one of the government classes in Durant. And I brought in a bunch of bills from the House and Senate, and we divided the class up, and I got to talk about the differences in the House and Senate. I taught them how to read a bill, and then we got to argue, which is one of my favorite things to do. And so the kids had a blast. We had a lot of fun with it, and nobody got hurt. So it was a lot of fun.
Well, good. We know it's true. I mean, we can't argue anymore. I mean, it used to be that you could have a discussion and even not agree. And, everybody was okay. And I mean, nobody wanted to kill each other, but it seems like now you can't have that kind of discussion, without somebody losing their nugget.
Or feeling hurt.
Yeah, and that's been the shame of it all is where we need to have argument. And I just got through talking to a group yesterday and said, listen, we had people complaining because the House and Senate last year were fighting and fussing and going back and forth. And I said, that's welcome to a republic. You want us fighting. You want us fussing. If everybody's just doing and going along, then that's called a dictatorship because somebody's scared to stand up. And so you need the lively debate. You need to be able to disagree. And at the end of the day, go buy barbecues. I'll give you a primary example of this, Jenny. When we got on just a minute ago, you don't agree with my beard. And I think the beard is phenomenal. And so we can disagree on that and we'll be okay.
No, we just said it looks like Grizzly Adams. We did not say we don't like Grizzly Adams.
I loved Grizzly Adams. It was one of the best programs on television when I was a kid. So
where the reruns of that are.
Argument about it. You didn't even say anything about how much white's in the beard, so I appreciate that.
Oh well.
Hers is all white, and mine is salt and pepper. kind of. You can't tell. I'm growing my own highlights right now.
Okay, so let's talk about last session, which Julie and I have called the most disappointing legislative session ever.
In our history, at least.
In the history of rope. Seemed like not a lot got done. Now, maybe that's me, and you're here to educate us and to talk to us about this. So we were talking before we came on about we could not seem to get an obscene public performances where children are present bill passed. What happened there?
Yeah, we got shut down on all fronts. That was a leadership call. A matter of fact, there were several of those bills that got filed. One on the House side, especially, that was through Kevin West ran one. I ran one that was a little bit different. Mine was a public lewd acts type bill. I wanted to approach it from the behavior standpoint, where we could shut these things down, and you treat it. Almost every bill that was out there ended up treating it real similar to a strip club or something like that, where if you're going to do it, you got to make sure it can't be exposed to the public or unwilling participants.
And children.
Well, and especially kids, that was one of the things that we argued back and forth was, do you just do it to a minor and say that that it can't be a minor? I had in my bill both the idea that you can't expose a minor, but I also had unwilling participants because I don't want to see that stuff.
I don't want to see that.
And my wife doesn't want to see that stuff.
Right.
And so when we were writing it, that was one of the conclusions I came to is, if you're going to do that kind of performance, then it needs to be behind closed doors where you can ensure that unwilling participants and minors can't see that. And so, but at the end of the day, that was a leadership call, and they said they didn't want to hear that bill. And that was how we had several other opportunities.
Okay, so leadership. We have, I don't know why I'm saying the Speaker of the House.
Yeah, we have chairmen of the committees in the Senate, and education chairman is Adam Pugh, but this may not have gone through education. I don't know. But
no,
Greg Treat.
No, so I can inject there to tell you, it went through general government. Went through general government and appropriations because anything with a felony in it has to go through appropriations because there's going to be cost involved. And so it got through both of those on the Senate side. Okay. On the House side, Kevin West did the same thing. Kevin West got through committee. He did not run through education, I don't believe. I can't remember on his. But it was when it hit the floor. So when we're talking about leadership, we're talking about leadership on both sides refused to hear this bill. So that means their floor leader and their pro tem or the Speaker of the House refused to do it.
Okay, so the pro tem is Greg Treat in the Senate, and the Speaker of the House is Charles McCall.
Yeah, correct.
And then you have floor leaders on the House and on the Senate that help bring bills to the floor. And so the way I've always understood it is the pro tem and the speaker will, say, I'm not going to hear this. And so the floor leader won't put it up if they're not going to hear it, or they won't argue, whatever. So, I mean, am I basically on track there with that?
Yeah, the House does it a little bit different. The House does it by a caucus. So what they'll do is they'll whip the caucus and find out where the caucus is on it. And if the caucus wants it, then they'll put it up. If they don't, they don't. There are even some bills, though, that they'll put up, obviously, that the caucus doesn't want because they have a lot of bills on the House side that go down on the floor. So, I mean, either people lied or they didn't. On the Senate side, it's been run quite a bit differently than that. And I actually like the idea of going to the caucus to get the caucus behind a bill before you hit it to the floor. But, on the Senate side, pretty much it's the call of the pro tem right now, or the pro tem and the floor leader. I would imagine if the floor leader came to the pro tem and said, I don't want this bill to be heard, the pro tem's not going to argue with him. So it's probably kind of a conference decision made between those two.
So, I was under the impression, and maybe you can help me out on this as a government teacher, maybe you can straighten me out, but I was kind of under the impression that government was of the people, by the people, for the people, not of the two people for everybody So I didn't realize that just a couple of people got to decide what happened in the state. I kind of was under the impression that people elected representatives to go to government on their behalf, and then they came together and made these decisions. I didn't so am I off there or something?
No, you're not. The only thing that I would say is not every bill is going to get through. So I think that we have to make a distinction between bills that have the votes to get all across the floor, ought to have some measure of priority whenever you're looking at them. You know, there's some bills. I'll give you a prime example of it. We had a bill this last year that for some reason was getting pushed to give illegal aliens in this state the right to vote. Why is that bill getting a priority to come to the floor, but a bill to protect minors from drag queen story hour is not? And clearly they did not have the votes. I mean, we had that bill beaten on the illegal driver license. We had that bill beat. I wanted to vote on that bill because I wanted it on record who's for it, who's against it, and I wanted to kill it.
Right.
But we can't even get a vote on on a bill to protect minors from drag queen story hour. And
I'd really like to know who was against that.
Me too.
Yeah. Well, if you go look at the pictures of the one that happened in Bartlesville, it'll make you sick at your stomach.
Oh yeah,
we've done writings on that.
Yeah.
But you know, the point is, you wanted to be, you know, on record for voting against the illegal driver's license issue.
Right.
Well, people should be on record for saying that they don't see anything wrong with waiving private parts of adults in front of children.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, don't you think maybe people should be on record for that? It'd be interesting to know what senators think that's okay. Although we have a lot of Democrats in the House and Senate who have been explicit about saying things like, you know, when we object to developmentally inappropriate books for minors, you know, that we're book burning and, you know, we're trying to censor people. So the Democrats are very out there about it, but it's interesting to know there have to be Republicans who think that this is just fine as well, or we would have these bills passed because Republicans have a majority in the House and in the Senate. So I think that's the reason why, you know, Julia and I, you know, our whole organization has been so frustrated. It's like, why do we have a Republican majority and we can't even protect children from inappropriate library books and having mentally confused adults flash their private parts in their face?
Well, and even like in my bill on the lewd acts portion of that bill, we didn't. It said that all in there that you could not show sexually explicit or lewd pictures, because when you go and look at some of these things, they're showing pictures of private parts and carrying around all the different you know, sexual tools and what have you, but yet it's okay to have a book that draws that out, like genderqueer, within your classroom. Or even draws it out with words and says, this is exactly what happens there. We're okay with these things being in these schools. And then you always have the naysayers that say, well, this isn't happening. Yeah. I went back and checked myself. That was when I got involved and said, okay, enough's enough, and started writing my own versions of these bills, because all you have to do is go look at their inventory online. They all put their library inventory online. It's a simple Google search. And if you're saying it's not there, it means you're either too lazy or too inept to go look for yourself. It's there.
You want the books there, or you want the books there.
Well, which I think probably your point may be stronger to that point. It's the same reason you would want drag queens performing. You say that that's culturally diverse. I say that's evil.
It is. It's wicked, and it causes mental illness when you show that to children that are not. They can't handle that. Their brains are not equipped to process that. My brain isn't equipped to process that.
I was just fixing to say, Julie, I think my brain isn't equipped to handle that, and there's a reason why it doesn't need to be out in public.
Right.
Well, you know, I just got on to, I was on X. Don't forget, it's not Twitter anymore. It's X. I was on X yesterday because KFOR just came out with another article about, where are these books? We're not seeing, the Department of Education doesn't keep lists of any of these books, blah, blah, blah. Well, I was not about to, put up with that. And so I got on and I posted in a thread about, yes, this is happening. I posted in a thread an article back from 2016. It was my first article ever that I wrote for the Federalist, which was about we shouldn't let our kids read smut. And it was about parents coming to me and saying, hey, they're making my kid read this for a grade in school. And so I posted that. And then I posted a podcast that we did with a lady named Janelle Shellum, who is an Edmond mom. And her kids are in Edmond schools, and she's been going through the lists that they've been given of what books the kids are supposed to read for the year. And she's been reading them all and posting the results online. Well, now everybody's mad because Janelle's actually out there just reading what the schools are telling her children they have to read and then publishing what it says. And so I put that up there. And, here's, I think, the thing that's the worst. There's so much gaslighting on the left that there's a guy named Unwoke Alfalfa Bill. Yeah, he can't even use his own name. Right. But he goes under the moniker of Unwoke Alfalfa Bill. And so he gets on and says something to the post that I made on this KFOR post. He gets on and says something about it. And I actually wrote it. I kept it someplace. I don't remember what I did. But he said, isn't this the wife of the failed Edmond mayoral candidate? So, something, and I got back on and said, what does that have to do with anything? I mean, you're talking about something that doesn't have to do with the topic at all. Good for you, way to get into the discussion. And I think we've got to push back against this nonsense, because that's really what these people want to do, is turn it into a different thing and get the topic off of it and make it something else. But it's evil.
Yeah. Well, and what I run into the gaslighting a lot. And I got into that when I ran the bill on CRT. This isn't anywhere in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Well, I've got the assignments. I've got the assignments that they were giving. I've got testimonies from teachers and parents. And by the way, there's a lot of teachers who don't want anything to do with CRT and the gender identity politics and all these other things. And so they're calling it out. They're contacting me saying, we don't like this junk that's going on. And a lot of them are the ones contacting us about the books. So we've got insider trading information to know what you're doing and why you're doing it. Don't tell me it's not there. And by the way, when I started off, I talked to y'all and told you, 15-year vet teacher. I taught in public schools. I've seen it where I've had teachers that I knew were indoctrinating kids into atheism, LGBTQ issues, transgender things, anything they could do to get them away from anything dealing with God or the Bible. And that's what we have to combat all the time, except what's happening is they're not slowing down or they're not zooming in on one issue. What they're doing is expanding the issue so much that it's hard for us to keep up. And I kind of share in your frustration, because these bills that we've been running as a conservative bloc in the Senate and in the House are getting out at barely a trickle pace, and the left is got a fire hose of lies and information and indoctrination coming out, and we can't catch up until we start attacking those things and safeguarding the citizens of this country and our kids when we get to that point. So we have to pick up the pace to combat what the liberals are doing.
Well, how in the world? I mean, if it's at the point right now where you guys can actually put these bills together, and I'm looking at a list of them. I have a list, so I know that they were out there and I know that they were proposed. Why do you suppose leadership quashes these bills? I've always heard that, well, we're going to make Oklahoma an unfriendly state and nobody will come here to do business. And enough with that. That's just,
I think it would be a welcome solution. Actually, I think good people would come here.
Well, exactly. And what organization wants to come to Oklahoma so their employees can see a drag show, or read dirty book? I mean, that's asinine.
No, and what we run into, those are all straw man arguments, just trying to get your attention off of it and scare you away from the real part of the issue.
Yeah.
What I have run into is that the moderate side, or there's a whole faction of people up there who are scared to make the argument, number one, I think, but number two, they don't think that we ought to be running bills on anything socially conservative or liberal. There's a view that we ought to just be running things for agencies and trying to work with the agencies, and that's all you ought to be working on. Language cleanup bills, there's no place for this. And what I found, and I think you and I have had this conversation before, Jenny, several times, if you're embarrassed by conservative arguments and conservative bills, guess what? You're not. But if you'll go and look at the flyers coming out next year, what you will see are people who claim now and are trying to kill these bills behind closed doors, who are saying that they are that they're a solid conservative. Just watch what they put on their flyers. These are a lot of these are the same people who are embarrassed by the fact that we run these kinds of bills, and so it's just an embarrassment to them. And so we've got to call these things out through elections and really call them out for, okay, where were you on the transgender bill? Where do you think that we should have run a bill to stop drag queens in public places? And I think that if people will start asking those tough questions of these candidates, you'll find out real quick where they are. They are completely embarrassed by the Republican platform. They ran as a Republican just because they knew they could win that way.
Exactly.
Well, and I mean, our contention has always been that the only reason why there's a Republican majority is because a bunch of Democrats put R by their name.
Yeah, that's very correct. Yeah, there's very correct. And I'll be honest.
I mean, I've got a great one for you right now, and I'm just going to call the guy out because I've called him out on social media all over the place. Representative Mark McBride. Yeah. Mark McBride is a darling of the teachers unions. He's fought these books I've not seen any books of any of these dirty books. I mean, he's called out everybody. I've confronted him. The man is an absolute joke. There's no way that man is a Republican.
Committee on the House side is that way.
The whole what, Jules?
The whole education committee on the House side is that way.
And what we have to be cautious of, if you are a moderate and you come out and tell me I'm a moderate and you campaign that way and everybody knows you are, I've got a little bit more respect for you because at least you're honest.
Exactly.
One of my favorite people in the Senate is Kay Floyd. And it is so because Kay is genuine. And I know when Kay asks a question, it's going to be a substantive question. It's going to be hard hitting, but Kay is genuine. She is who she is. Yeah. So I don't have to worry about Kay behind closed doors saying something she won't say out in front of open doors. And we need to strive to make sure that our Republican Party is the same way.
Right.
It's interesting.
She always sit down and have a reasonable discussion, and you never wondered what her real thoughts were. And I respect that way more than the ones that lie to us and string us along and waste all of our time saying that they agree with us and then stab us in the back. I mean,
well, and the crazy thing about Kay Floyd is, we don't agree on a whole lot of issues, but that's not the point. I mean, we've had discussions with her over the past. I mean, not recently, but over the past where, they've been very nice discussions. I mean, and we just go, well, she'll say, girls, I just don't agree with that. And I mean, how can you fault her for that? I mean, right. She's a Democrat, but at least she's an honest person. And a lot of the Republicans that we have in the House and even in the Senate today, I can't say that for them.
Right.
No. And that's part of the problem. What they'll say things behind closed doors, and then and do a whole different thing when they're out in front of those doors. And what I really long for is the day when everybody in our caucus and in the legislature, in the House and Senate, they are the same person in front of doors as they are behind doors, and we're just not there. I don't know that you ever get there, but I will say this: I'm seeing a change in that because we're starting to get more and more people who do stand behind those issues. I think that we're starting to very quickly catch that mark where we can have that as a majority.
Good.
Well,
I've just been praying for the liar pants on fire to actually happen, but they might burn down the whole Capitol building.
Yeah.
well, and I was going to give you an example of what you just talked about, as a matter of fact. So I'm not a huge fan of the Frontier. It's an online magazine. They're very left leaning, but they had this article, and I read it the other day. Oklahoma treasurer says exemptions for woke investment ban likely in closed door meeting with state retirement fund leaders. So for those who don't know, there was a bill passed, I think it was not last year, not this session, but last session, that said that the Oklahoma Retirement Fund was not going to pull in any investments from companies that were using ESG or quote unquote woke requirements to do business with. And so we passed that bill. And now the treasurer is meeting with people. Todd Russ is meeting with people apparently in the background to try to get them to convince them to do something else. So we found that out with Common Core. The bill said one thing, but then we do something else. So it's so frustrating to see. And I don't know how do you feel about that? And what do you do as a legislator when you're like, hey, I'm a senator, I voted for that bill and now we're doing something different?
Right. And a lot of it comes down to, even on the ESGs, my point on the ESG is, if it's wrong for oil and gas, and it is wrong for oil and gas, it ought to be wrong for everything.
Right.
And what I'm wanting to dig into now is, are these ESGs are the same culprits? So when I taught in the classroom, the kids that I was having problem with, if you went and talked to other teachers, it was usually the same kids that other teachers were having problems with. Right. So if you've got investors like BlackRock and some of these others that are doing these ESGs and these, they call them corporate diversity index, CDI,
yes. Yeah.
Or CEI's, corporate equity index. I think they have several of them. They're going to be the same players. And so if it's wrong for one, it's wrong for all of them. And we have to address that at some point to make sure that people understand that you're not going to discriminate against people and use that as a way to affect their livelihood. But we should have done that for every investment in Oklahoma, not just one for oil and gas. And so we're running into a problem there.
So just out of curiosity, so let's say that this is true and Todd Russ is actually meeting with people and they're going to go ahead and figure out a way and end around that bill to invest in some of these companies. What can you do as a senator? Can you do anything about that?
Well, so we put the ability to have exemptions in the bill when we go back and look at the text. So we gave him that ability, and we need to reevaluate when we do these. One of the biggest lessons I learned is that if you do not put teeth in a bill, they're simply going to ignore it. And probably the most disappointing example of that is, we passed 613, which was the ban on transgender surgeries. That bill got through. We left some things on the table that I really didn't like. I do not think public money should be even allowed anywhere near it. I don't think insurance companies should even be allowed to do it. So we left those things on the table, but we got the core of it done, so I was okay with that. And now our attorney general, before the ACLU even comes in with a lawsuit, signs a document saying he will not even enforce the law that we just passed with no counter lawsuit after him. We have a problem there of major, major weakness to just cave to them like that. If they're going to sue, and we know that they are, then go after them that way. But to sign a document before they've even filed a lawsuit just to say that I'm not going to enforce the law that was just passed, that ought to be truly, truly troubling to a lot of people.
Our attorney general.
Yeah.
Yes.
Who's supposed to make sure our state laws, the ones that you sit there and sign off on, are enforced.
Right. He is the chief law enforcement officer for the state, and his job is to enforce laws.
So I think, the public has to know about that, and their public, you have been informed. Okay, I'm going to change the topic just a second, and I'm going to share my screen a second and pull in something that, that I want to talk about next. Yay! Senate approves historic education funding package. So we've talked about this several times. The Oklahoma Senate today gave passage to its historic $700 million education package. So do we want to chat about that a little bit?
Sure. Let's get on it.
So I just wanted to show one thing. So let me get back to where I'm sharing my screen. I hate that you have to remove it and then go back in and add something. It's not the easiest thing to try to figure out. All right, hold on one second. Let me share my screen again. It would be nice if you could just flip through tabs, but it doesn't work that way. Okay, so here is the nation's report card. This is the nation's report card. It's not the state's. This is the nation's report card. And I picked this particular one. So this is grade 4 mathematics. And if you go down and you look at Oklahoma complete results, difference from national public. Now, all of the down scores, the downs mean that they're under the national public scores, and the diamonds meant that they were basically the same. Okay, so this is 2022. 2019, you can see the, the dates, the years are going down. So let's look at the down arrows on, this is 4th grade math. So now we're down to 1998, and we had an up arrow by 0.64%. That's stunning for 4th grade. I mean, stunning. What is it about 1998 that hasn't been, we haven't even reproduced this results because they've all been under for every year since. And now we're as low as, and they say it's COVID and blah, online learning, blah, blah, blah. It's not. Look, they've all been down. There was minus 4.86 in 2003. There was minus 8.01 in 2022. This is reading. Now, sorry, this is reading. So why in the world do we have this? Why are we giving these people, if this was if my engine blew up and I went to a repair shop to get my engine fixed, but they showed me the statistics on their engine repair and it looked like this, I would never give that business one single dime, let alone any of my business. Why are we funding this?
Well, so let's talk about this way. What your example gave was a free market system, right? What incentive does your mechanic have to get it right? Well, if you don't, where are you gonna take your business?
Someplace else.
Right.
Yes.
And so today, what you saw this last year was trying to figure out school choice in a way that would work. And so we were looking at it from a standpoint, 2 years ago, 1647, and you and I had a lot of discussions on 1647 because I do not agree with a voucher system. I never have agreed with a voucher system, and we fought that one back and forth. And as a matter of fact, I worked on a tax refund, tax credit idea with you guys on how do we just do a tax refund and give people their money back. That is the most efficient way to do it. If you're not satisfied with your school and you decide you want to move your child out, then what we'll do is give you that tax money back and try and create more and more competition amongst your schools where you can pull your money out and go to a different school. Or you can do the homeschool thing if you choose to. And I know there's a lot of debate between us on that one. But that's kind of the idea behind it was we were looking at if we can get more of a free market system where we could get parents to be able to move their kids out of that school, then that's a system of accountability where we might be able to start using that as a method to get that done. So that's the argument behind it.
Okay, but let me make, I'm just going to remove this for 1 second. So let me make another argument though. If we're talking about a free market system, okay, that's my dollars and Julia's dollars and your dollars, right? There are personal dollars. I'm deciding I'm going to machine shop X to have my engine repaired, right? And those are my dollars. But the problem that we have with public education is those aren't your dollars. I mean, those are dollars that have been appropriated or taken from you, at significant cost. I mean, if you don't pay your property taxes, they come and foreclose on your property and move you out, and the state takes it over. So it's not, I mean, it's done at the point of a gun, essentially, that this money is taken. And then it goes into a big pot where it's appropriated out, to each agency. So that's not my money anymore. I mean, once the government has it, it's not like it's a bank and I can go and say, well, I'm going to withdraw this money that I put in to take my kid blah, right?
Well, until we pass the tax credit, you would be correct. But once we pass that tax credit, let me finish. Once we pass that tax credit, what it does is it allows us now, you, the parent, the taxpayer, to get some of that money back that you were being taxed. So schools are taxed 3 different ways. They're taxed through the federal government, which is the smallest amount, the state government, which is the middle amount, and then your local ad valorem tax, which we can have a whole new argument over whether or not ad valorem tax is even right either.
Say it right though, property tax, because my feeling is they use ad valorem tax to confuse people so they don't understand that's a tax on your property. That means that if you don't pay it, you can have your property removed from you by the state.
Right. And I would even argue that if we have property tax, do you really own property? But that's a whole other discussion we can get into.
You don't even need to argue that. You don't.
Right. So when we're looking at it, we're not saying that you're not going to pay ad valorem tax or property tax. I'll do it that way. We're not saying that we're not going to do the federal tax, which we need to talk about that bill as well, because I don't think that we ought to be putting federal dollars into our public education system. But so what we're saying is we're going to give you, the taxpayer, back up to $7,500, depending on your tax structure, of your tax dollars back to you. So yeah, you are getting actually some of that money back the way that we set that up.
Okay, so I know for a fact we don't spend $7,500 just in taxes for the state. I mean, I've seen my husband
so much money to pay $7,500 in Oklahoma taxes.
Yeah, we must be poor or something because you may be, because I am too. But the upper brackets do. Some of those other brackets that we put in do, and I don't have the breakdown. I'd have to go find, and y'all may have the breakdown. You may have the breakdown of how much tax money you put in according to how much money you earn. I don't know. No, I don't have that right now. But I guess the point of the matter is if you're getting back money that you didn't put in, at that point it's a voucher.
Depends, and that would be true, except that how much money, what tax bracket is that we're talking about? So if you make $150,000 household income, how much money are you putting in taxes?
Probably $100 in Oklahoma taxes.
Yeah, in Oklahoma taxes.
So
I mean, I would be surprised, and I may be wrong. I'm always the one to say, if I'm wrong, I'll admit that I'm wrong. Except to my husband, I won't do that, but just kidding. Just kidding.
No, you're not.
Well, no, that maybe. Okay, but here's my other point too. So, if you're getting money back that you didn't put in, then it's like because we've talked about $7,500, parents get this $7,500. So let's leave that for a second and let's look at it like this too. So if we're getting back tax dollars that go into the system up to $7,500. Okay. So the system is losing some tax revenue. At what point does it make sense just to stop taxing parents for that and let them take that money on their own without the government even getting involved to educate their children the way they want to educate their children? So, because once the government steps in, and you and I have talked about this, and we totally agree on this. I mean, once the government steps in, there's a string between you and the government, because those tax dollars are stolen or taken from me and you and Julia. And we want to make sure that they're spent appropriately, that they're spent legally, that they go where they're supposed to go. We're going to have Cindy Bird on Friday, and we're going to talk about, that what her job is. And it's to make sure that the dollars that go in are spent appropriately and legally. Right. So if we had that money going into the system, and yet there's parents are taking that money to put their kid into a different school, at what point is the government not going to have to come between the parent and that school, or between the school and the parent, however it works, to make sure the accountability for those tax dollars is 100%?
Well, and that's always the question that comes up. You and I have had that discussion on the most conservative, best way to do it would be to just don't tax them, just to cut the taxes so that they have them. Right. But that wasn't the proposal that was set in front of us. The proposal was, can we do it through a tax rebate or a tax credit type system? And how much is that tax credit always became the debate. I have not run, nor have I voted on a perfect bill yet. So you always have to take a bill and look at the pluses and minuses. What do I think I can get done with this bill? What can I get? Even 1775, they made me cut so much out of, and for those who don't know, 1775 was the critical race theory bill. They made me bleed that bill down to almost nothing. I wanted to put the rules and enforcement in, and they wouldn't let me do it. They made me take all that out. And I wanted to go after universities. So even the bill, one of my favorite bills that I've run, I didn't like everything that was with it. I just had to pick what I thought would work and what would get us the farthest down the road towards some kind of system. This one is flawed. There's no doubt about it. It's not a perfect system, and we will adjust as we go. And perhaps as we move down the road, maybe it is to remove the system and just give tax cuts completely across the board to try and see if we could get that done. But so far, that's not been what was put in front of us, and so we had to make that call.
Well, if you really believe in free market, we would have voluntary taxes, but that's the whole.
That's never going to happen.
Yeah.
So Michael just
we don't believe in free market.
Yeah. Michael just texted in and he said 7,500 is for people that make under the lowest threshold.
Correct. Now,
so that's like under 150,000. So as you go up in income, you get less money back. So it's guaranteed that the $7,500 is all for people that don't pay in anywhere near that amount.
Yeah, and so the argument back to that is how many people that are in that under $70,000 mark are going to take advantage of it. My thought, and when I talk to others, I don't think very many in that lower income bracket are going to be the ones that utilize that tax credit anyways.
It is not a tax credit.
Well, that is a tax credit. It's a refundable.
So, but refundable just simply means that when you file your taxes at the end of the year, you get $7,500, period, that you didn't put in the first place. So again, that's a voucher. It's not a tax credit. A tax credit, and the one that you and I and Julia worked on for years. And let's not forget the Homeschool Association, because Jana Belcher and Carrie Bertrand and that whole group with Homeschool, they've worked with you too. And we were always talking about, if we put it in, we want it back. So if we spent $750 or whatever, then we would apply for that to get what we put in back. Because the argument always was, if we spent it then yeah, let's get it back, because then that is kind of like what we just talked about, which is we're not going to tax you in the first place so that you can use your own money to educate your kid the way you want. So in that particular instance, what we're talking about with this isn't anything that you and I and Jana and the rest of us talked about with a tax credit, because it has to be called and considered a voucher then if you're getting money that isn't yours, that you didn't put in.
And that lower bracket would be considered some form of a voucher because of, like you said, they're not putting money in. That's why it had refundability. Right. Actually, on the bill that we worked on, though, we did, in the language, I did have it utilizing the earned income tax credit, the EITC, which would have been a voucher of sense as well with that on the lower end, because if you have somebody who hasn't put any money in, and our goal is to try and help them be able to get their kids out of a bad situation, it had to have that element in it.
And here's the interesting thing, though, Senator, is because I hate to call you David, even though you're like a friend. I hate to do. You're still a senator.
I know I am, but you know my name's David.
I know. I just don't. I never want to be, disrespectful. But here's because I'll argue with you all day, but I'm never going to be disrespectful. So, but here's the thing. So you were just saying. And this has been the argument forever. Well, we need to help the lower income people. We need to help the lower income people. And you just said this yourself, and I've heard people say it. And we know from if you go to, I'll think about it in a second. I don't want to get off topic. You just said yourself, the lower income people don't use these things. They don't, sure. It's never enough for them to be able to put 3 or 4 kids in a private school or whatever. So it doesn't, even though we say we're doing it to help the lower income people never take advantage of it. And then what we have now is a system in which we're going to ensnare private schools, probably religious schools, and say, well, the state, you're getting money from all of these families that are coming from the state, so you have to do fill in the blank.
Well, so partial argument to what you're saying. Yes, the lower income's not going to do it. Now, I've never really said that I'm doing it to try and get poor families, because I don't think that they'll take advantage of it, and mine's a little different than yours. It's not that they don't have enough to get there. The reason why they made the tax credit $7,500 for the lower family is that it's the tax credit capability. That's usually right around what the tuition would cost. So you don't get the full $7,500. You only get the amount back for what your tuition costs. So that's number one. Number two, the thing that you have to remember is I'm doing this to try and make sure that we give families the opportunity to get good kids out of bad schools. So do I care if they're the low income specifically? No, they don't have to be the low income, because I don't think that the low income will take advantage of it. A lot of those parents aren't paying close enough attention to do it anyways. What I'm looking at is, can we take a family that's right on the edge? And I've got lots of families in my district that are friends of mine that are eating bologna sandwiches every day to send their kids to a private school or to homeschool, because the mom or the dad can't work to be able to do that and provide that. So if we can provide some kind of a tax credit, and at that point it would be a tax refund for most of those within that tax bracket. Now, like I said, I don't have the data, but when you look at that up to $150,000 household income range, which is most of the families I'm talking about, it is my belief, without the data, so again, I'm kind of talking out of it without having the data right in front of me. I'd like to see it, but that should be at that point primarily a tax refund. So for a family making $150,000 a year, they should be able to have enough money to consider that a tax refund, or primarily a tax refund, in order to get their kids out of a bad situation. The debate that we had is real similar to the one you're talking about, because what we wanted to make sure was, we think that very many of these families that have a household income below $70,000 are actually going to take advantage of this, and the answer I believe is no. So does the vouchering of it have very much to play? No, I don't think that it does. I do think that the primary group that you're talking about are going to be those families between the $70,000 and the $150,000 household income, and there it would be a tax credit. And then when you go above, it drops back down, I think, what, to $5,500 maximum. And there again, they don't just get a full refund for it. So they're not just getting $6,500 or they're not just getting $5,500. I think Victory Life's tuition here in Durant is $4,800. I may be wrong on that. So you would only get that $4,800 back. In other words, you don't get the full tax refund or credit. You get it for the tuition.
But it's also per child. So see, that's the other thing that we didn't talk about. So if it's per child, then you're talking about, let's just use Victory Life since it's in your, so it's $4,800. So then you've got parents who have 3 kids who want to put 3 kids in there. That's $4,800. There's no way they're paying that much tax. I'm sorry, David, but there's no way.
I don't have the data to back that up.
It's a voucher.
And another thing that has just made me crazy about this whole thing, UNESCO and all the school choice cabal that has been pushing this into legislation, why didn't they spend those millions and millions of dollars just writing scholarship checks to those families that needed it or wanted it or would take advantage of it? They wanted government involved. That's the whole trick that I can't shake. It's like, why didn't they build some schools in those rural areas that didn't have a choice of schools? Why didn't they give scholarships to kids that needed scholarships? But no, they went for legislation. They wanted government involved. That is not okay. That's just not okay.
Right. And a lot of those school choice organizations are at odds with me. They don't like me very much because I have opposed what they've done in the past. This was the closest one to a tax credit that I could get to. And so that's why I went along with it.
Yeah. Well, and I've heard too, and I don't know if you can corroborate this, and this is just all under the radar stuff that I just have coming back to me. But I've heard that there are people, that the rules are now being made at the Oklahoma Tax Commission for this, for the tax credits. And I've heard that there are people from OCPA and from other school choice organizations that are actively involved in creating the rules. And that really bothers me too, because if that's the case, you're talking about people who are funded by people like the Waltons. There are all kinds of dark money that go into these school choice organizations. And yet these school choice organizations are being put in a position where they can write the rules. I'm hoping that what I'm hearing is not true. But that's what I've been hearing. I mean, would you think that that's a correct way of doing that? I mean, do you think that
No, it's definitely not. The agency does not need to bring in a lobby group to be able to write the rules for them. We've run into that too. And you said you're going to be talking to Cindy Bird on the audit coming up. That's a good question to ask her, is who had access to those GEAR funds that were misallocating them. And of course, if you hand the keys to the palace over to a lobby group, they're not gonna handle the funds the way that they need to be handled, and there's less transparency to it. So no, so let me put it to you this way: I've not heard that yet about the fact that there's others helping make the rules. It wouldn't shock me if that is true.
Well, as a senator, would you be willing to look into that and talk to the tax commission and find out who's making the rules? Because I definitely think that it would be not okay to have any school choice lobbying organizations creating rules, because, and here's the reason why, and I may be wrong, so please correct me if I'm wrong. It's not offensive to be corrected for me.
Okay.
I believe that in that bill, it said that sponsoring organization. So if you were an organization that had that sponsored a private school, or you were a private school, you could get kind of a 10% kickback on the funds that were being used for that particular child. Am I wrong?
No, you're incorrect on the bill we voted on this last year.
Okay.
That was in 1647. That was one of the biggest arguments we had was they called that the student fund.
Yes.
And they were giving a 10% kickback automatically into the student fund, which is highly, highly problematic, unconstitutional in so many ways, and just a hiding place for hundreds of millions of dollars. But that was in 1647. That was not in the
so it's
bill
not
that
in
we
this.
put in. That's correct.
Okay, because
Yeah,
I'll admit I was so disgusted over the $7,500. I didn't even read the bill, which I should. I mean, I always advocate that, and I didn't even read it. I need to go back and read it. So
let me go back and answer your first question, though. Yes, I'll look into it and find out where that's going with the tax commission, because after that audit on the gear funds came out, we need to make sure that we're not allowing other lobby groups to be the ones doing the rulemaking process for us. That baffles me why the tax commission would do that. But let me do some investigating and I'll find out.
Well, I really honestly appreciate that, because I think that's what all of us have, any conservatives anyway, have complained about with the federal government, is that it's always people that aren't elected people that are writing the rules. And that's why we are where we are. And we've got to stop this, because it should be the people that are represented by the people who elect them that write the rules, that write the laws, not lobbying organizations.
Right. Well,
who are privately paid by who knows who, because it's all dark money.
It's kind of fascinating that you said that. I just got back from the mock convention of the states in Williamsburg, Virginia, and one of the bills we argued and debated was about a term limit, not for just Congress, but also for bureaucrats. And that was the argument that came up. They're not elected, so they need to be termed out. We need to get rid of them, because you elected me to represent you. Nobody elected them to go and do this rule writing. So yeah, no, that's absolutely correct.
Well, there should be no education lobbyists. That is tax paid lobbyists. That's just so wrong.
It's a frustration. We talk about the swamp all the time. So many of us say, well, it's the swamp in DC, but the swamp are the unelected bureaucrats. That's who the swamp is. And to say that Oklahoma doesn't have a swamp is a lie.
No, they have a swamp. No, there's no doubt.
And we should be working on stopping the swamp in Oklahoma is what we should be working to do.
Yeah. So that actually links, Jenny, back to our earlier conversation. Generally, when you look at the swamp, you're going to find people who are not what they say they are. So just a note on that.
Well, and that's being prime example, and her little group that should legally be felons now, but that whole thing. But
I wish we could write a law to make people use justice. Wouldn't that be nice?
It'd be nice.
Yeah. Okay, so I wanted to put something in here. This is I don't know if I can make it bigger or not. This is a schematic that a man did. He works for Cato, used to anyway, Andrew Colson. And I wonder if that helps at all, a little. This is the inflation-adjusted federal spending per pupil and achievement of 17-year-olds, the percent change since 1970. So these are reading scores in the red. So right here. Here are math scores in the blue down here. And here are science scores under here, right here. And here is the line of federal spending. And this goes out to 2010. I don't know why it cut the bottom of it off. But it kept, hold on, I think I might be able, oops. Was I able to move it? No. Okay. It goes out to 2010, I believe, this particular slide does. There, 2006. There it is. Why do we keep taking federal funds, Senator Bullard?
Well, so I don't know the answer to that. That has been one of the strangest debates I got into. So you know this. I've run it for 2 years now. a bill to create a 10-year plan to remove all federal funding from public education. Number one, it's an easy argument because it's unconstitutional. That is a specific right, not mentioned, or power, not right, not mentioned in the Constitution, that is specifically reserved for the states. And I'm yet to get a hearing on it, but I sure am getting some attention on it, because the most interesting argument, you will see people's true colors come out whenever you make this argument, because the worst argument I get on this is we ought to take every federal dime that's available out there, no matter what. And there's an old clip that gets played around a lot of the Andy Griffith Show, and there's an old hobo that was trying to get his son Opie to live that hobo life. And he said, well, what's to say that the boy wouldn't be happier with me? And Andy Griffith said, no, it doesn't work that way. He said, he'll take the first shiny, flashy thing that comes along, and before he realizes there's the hook in it, it's too late. And that describes our federal funds down to a T. There is a hook in every dime that we take and accept. And so we have to be so very cautious. Education would be the easiest one to look at, because it's only 12% of what their budget is now.
Yeah.
The sad part about that is I can't even get data on numbers. So that's one of the reasons I want to do it anyways, because I want to find out how much money are they really taking, because nobody can seem to get me that answer. But number two, I know for a fact, we've already seen the Obama administration, and we've seen Joe Biden do it now, attempt to do it twice, and he'll keep at it. That they tried to say, you're going to do the transgender thing, or we're going to take your Title IX money. Well, in my area, I've got a lot of superintendents that when I talk to you about that, they say, well, they can keep their money. I'm not doing it. Well, that's fine and dandy, except that what about the ones who will? Because you have a lot of them who will take all federal funds at any cost. They don't care what it takes. It's all about bottom lines and dollars. And so, that's been one of the most peculiar things, is that you're willing to take it. I've seen a lot of hats and signs. I'm fixing to probably buy one that says, God's children are not for sale.
Yes.
And why we would be willing to just sell them down the road, and they're not doing any good. And the next move of the Biden administration is to come back and say, you're going to do the transgender stuff, or we're going to take away your free and reduced lunches. Right. Well, that's a real hook, and that's the real deal. And you're going to have a lot of schools that are going to cave on that.
It's not federal funding, it's federal debt, because we're in debt. So we're heaping mounds of debt onto the shoulders of our children for the children. I don't think so.
Right. Well, and I've even had some people say, well, I paid those federal taxes in. Well, what's fascinating on federal taxes is Oklahoma is actually a consumer of federal dollars, not a contributor. So we don't put in enough money in tax to be able to claim all the money we get back out of it. So why not just send it back to them? Don't take it. Send it back to them. Make it more so that we're a consumer, not a contributor. But I've also talked with our federal delegation to say, listen, I need a bill from the federal level that says, for every dollar of tax that the state refuses for education, our debt liability or our tax liability to the federal government ought to be reduced dollar for dollar. And
that's actually a great bill. You'll never get that ever.
No, but I'm going to keep trying. But it would be nice to be able to do. It's you get every argument under the sun. I had somebody try and tell me, well, it's $7.9 billion is what we would have to make up. No, I can't find that anywhere. The entire budget for education is $4.5 billion. So I don't know where they're getting that number from. Actually, I think it's a doable number, especially when you break it down into 10 years. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So if you set a 10-year line item out to say, well, we're going to get rid of these funds here and there, boy, we could really, really set Oklahoma apart. And if you'll note, too, in the bill, I called it the Oklahoma Education Independent Act. And the whole point of it is that we, as Oklahoma, should be in charge of our own education and do it our way.
Well, Senator, one of the things that, talk about how to make up the money, Texas spends 25 cents on the dollar on administration costs. So we want to be like Texas. Let's just fire 75% of the administrators and you've got it. Then it can actually go to the classroom. We've got so many people trying to spend money their way, and so many counselors in school and all of that, they're not educating our kids. They need to focus on educating and not managing.
And I'll tell you the other problem. There's a couple of problems. Everybody wants to compare us to Texas. First off, Texas is the 7th largest economy in the world.
I know.
So we're never going to catch them. Number two, that you got to remember, Texas, if you want to do it like Texas, do it all by ad valorem and make everybody so poor who actually work. I mean, they call it their golden pennies. I think it's 3 meals that they can raise without even a vote in Texas. And what's happened is you've got a whole lot of really nice buildings in Texas, and sure, there's a lot of money going in education, but everybody who has property is paying out the nose for it.
Yeah.
And if you want to take a state like Oklahoma that's already a poverty state and implement a Texas plan, you'll make us the poorest state in the union.
But all I'm saying is we can stop spending so much money on administration. There is no doubt about that. We have way overload on administration. And of course, the teachers union and all of those people are going to be against it vehemently. But that's what needs to happen. We need to eliminate all the bureaucracy within the system, within the education.
Well, and let me argue with you. Let me argue with you in a different way. I think that what that indicates to me when I hear you say that is that we have a school board problem. And so our school board elections need to make sure our school board elections are on common elections, that they're recallable, things like that. So I think we have to deal with the school boards.
OEA will recall every good school board member known to man. So they can outspend it on that, on recall.
Well, there is truth to that for sure. But that is a good question though, David. Why can we not? What is the argument? What is stopping? I mean, our leadership, I'm sorry, they're terrible, absolutely terrible. And I think, Oklahomans don't understand, that it's leadership that blocks so much at Treat and McCall, and the going back and forth. It stops so much of the good legislation that you elect your representative to go up and protect you. Because don't forget, and I know you know this because we've talked about this numerous times. The job, my favorite story, which is the worst story I have, is when I was sitting in a representative office. He's no longer there, but I was sitting in their office and I was talking to him about the Common Core bill. And he said, well, Jenny, what do you think our job is up here? It's to write laws. And I went, no, your job is to protect my liberty. And sometimes that means not writing laws. Sometimes that means getting rid of laws, because your job is to protect my liberty. That's your only job. And, it frustrates me that we have so many people that are up there that don't understand what their job is. Their job isn't to write bills. It isn't to put your name on a bill that's going to get you on a conservative index. It isn't to do anything like that. It's to protect our liberty. And you're right about Texas. And we should, in Oklahoma, to protect our liberty, we should work to get rid of ad valorem or property tax, period, and pay for everything, whether it's a grocery tax or a whatever it might be. But not bad. So how is it that we're not able to get school board elections on a November ballot? That makes no sense to me, because it's cheaper.
Right.
Why?
We had some excellent school board bills last year.
Yeah,
we did. So, Jenny, just for clarification, you're not saying a state question put the school board changes in a state question or referendum, are you?
No.
Okay, so you're saying actually set the elections in June and November?
Correct. Yes, correct.
I don't know. So the last 2 or 3 years, we've actually passed that one that has gone out of the Senate and has been stopped in the House without even a hearing. So a lot of that goes back again to the same problem of that liberal leadership, or I don't even know if that one is a liberal leadership or not, because that one's getting stopped in the committee process on the House side on that one. And I don't know what that is. That's that same, and I hate to even use the word because I've been called a rhino, but it's that same logic that says that I'm a Republican, but I'm not really a Republican. I'm just running on it. Those are the ones that are preventing that one from going through, and I haven't figured out what their major hangup. That's a no-brainer. That's an easy bill. You have to answer the question for me. Why do you want fewer people voting in school board elections? And so I don't understand. Say it again, Julia.
They want to control the outcome.
It's all about kingdom building, right? So I want the kingdom building. I want to be able to set my kingdom up so that I can do no wrong, even if I'm not doing a good job. And why we're protecting that, I have no idea. It's just I don't understand why we're protecting the marijuana industry either, but we are, and so we're in the same boat on same ends.
I think honestly, it's what we have talked about. All three of us have talked about together and over the years. Money. I mean, the love of money, not money, but the love of money is the root of all evil, according to biblical tenet. And there is so much money coming into public schools. I mean, people don't seem to understand the amount of money. It's not just the federal dollars. It's not just the appropriations. I mean, in wealthy communities like Edmond, you have millions of dollars coming into their foundation just from wealthy people who, want to be able to create SEL programs, which are, a way that CRT gets, kids get exposed to CRT in so many school districts. So, I mean, it's the love of money that is predicating all of this nonsense. And I don't know how you stop it, because you have to find people that don't love money. And, it's very hard to find those.
Well,
it is. But we also, from our standpoint, have to infiltrate leadership. You're going to have to get people who are willing to get into leadership, that aren't afraid of these issues, that are willing to go in and fight for while they're here. And then make this not about a career, but about a calling. And I think that's really where you are. And like I said before, I'm seeing the change. I know from the outside it may be hard to see, but I'm seeing some change in that. I'm starting to see more and more members get in who are very they're there for a calling, a very clear calling. They're not there to make a name for themselves. And we're always going to have some that get in that are for the name. But I'm seeing a very slow progressive change. There's a group of us up there who pray together, study together, work together on these kinds of bills. And that group is not shrinking. That group is growing.
We'll get them all back together to redesign this tax bill, the tax credit bill. You get them all back together and let's go back to the drawing board.
Yeah, and y'all study that part that says thou shalt not steal.
Thou shalt not. Okay, so I want to throw one more thing in here. So let me put this up. And then let me. I know it's always a thing. Let me just put it up like this for now so we can look at it. So this is from the Oklahoma State report card. So this isn't just, I'm not making something up. It's not from the feds. This is just the Oklahoma State report card. So when you look at academic achievement on the Oklahoma State report card, how prepared are students for the next grade, course, or level? So 49% of all students are prepared for the next grade or course level in Oklahoma. Our English language proficiency, how well are English learners meeting their, only 32% are on that. It's such a frustration because we know we're sucking air on this, and yet we keep throwing money at it, and we're not getting, the results that we need to do. I mean, we're going to have to get off of here because we're already 14 minutes over. What do you see? What do you see as the best way that you can possibly help Oklahomans increase their public education takeaways? I mean, how can we increase what our kids are doing in classrooms? Is it specifically academically? Is it specifically a local issue? Is it only a state issue? Is it getting the feds out? I mean, just kind of before we get out of here, what's kind of your broad thought process on that?
Yeah, so you touched on one of them. We have to get the federal government out of it because of so many restrictions. They waste so much time, and you're not getting the bang for your buck. Anything that you do, I mean, when you look at our school feeding programs, when I talked to superintendents about getting the federal dollars out, they were kind of all for it. Because I mean, when they look at like the food, I mean, their trash cans get filled up with food because kids won't eat it. It's so bad. And that's just wasting money where we could get money more targeted into our classrooms. Right. I think, too, you have to incentivize the best of your teachers. What reason does a teacher have to grow if they're going to make the same money no matter how bad they perform on these test scores? And so I've worked on that since I've gotten in about how do we incentivize the best of our teachers to be able to get the best money. But then you have to introduce that free market idea. And we all agree or disagree on different points of it. But if you can't get your kid out of a bad school, then what good does it do? If your kid is stuck in a failing school, then what good are we doing? And I think that we're touching on that subject. I think that you and I and others are having the argument and debate on what's the best way to do that. But the reality is if we don't inject competition in the schools, then we have nothing. We don't have anything over them. Norman can be Norman schools and talk about gender fluidity and talk about their and coerce their teachers and students into preferred pronouns and all of that. So we have to continue to research this idea of free markets and getting more competition in our schools, because if you don't, there is no reason for them to get better. They'll be satisfied with status quo.
Well, and I agree, but the one thing we've got to agree on here is that the government can't compete with itself. Only private industry can compete with itself. Right. So that's kind of been a frustration of mine with this whole, and Julia, we're big on this. We just despise the whole, school choice movement in this whole idea that we're going to somehow the government can incentivize the government. The government can't incentivize itself. So that's, I think, the one place where we've got to veer off right there and realize that the only competition is going to come from outside the government. That's where the free market is. The government can never participate in free market because it's tax dollars that run that, and the tax dollars can't provide incentivization to somebody who they've stolen it from in the first place. So the government can't be active in the free market, and the government can't incentivize itself. So if that's the case, the only way we can do that is by pulling out as much money as we possibly, instead of continuing to invest $700 million in a failing system, we have to pull that money out. That's the only incentive that the public, that the government has, is the government gets those tax dollars no matter what. They're just perfectly happy to eject a person off of their land, some 80-year-old woman who's not paying her taxes, and take her property away from her. And they do it every day, multiple times a day. So they don't have any incentive to go, well, how better can I spend these tax dollars? Because they get them no matter what. And then if the state turns around and gives them $700 million more for not doing any better than they did the year before, we're incentivizing failure. We're not incentivizing free market.
Right.
Well, and the other side of that we have to focus on too is getting schools back in their lane. You and I worked a lot on the sex education stuff, and
yes.
These preferred pronouns and all the different things. I mean, CRT was just a small step in trying to get our schools back in their lane. So if we're going to spend the money on it, you have to make sure that money's not going to DEI or CRT or preferred pronouns or counselors that want to push transgenderism or sex at any cost. And so we've got to get our schools back in
Comprehensive
our
sex
lane.
education, which is what Tulsa Public Schools have.
From Planned
Yes.
Parenthood is where it comes
Yeah,
from.
so those are all steps that we have to take. We've got to get them back in their lane.
Well, next, what if we come up with a bill for next year that says when schools don't meet the target of such and such proficiency, that we take money away from them instead of incentivizing by them giving them more money to do crappy jobs?
Yeah, I think
Maybe that
that
could be
was
a bill next year.
Yeah, there was a lot of discussion on that, about the incentives and the pay not being just flat based on no standards whatsoever, but could be based on that. So that is definitely something that's out there and on the table.
Yeah, I think that's the only way we're going to see any improvement is you don't get money just for doing what you did the year before, which was not even anything. I mean,
Right.
you're going to have to get money for doing better. And until we flip that system on its head, David, I don't see how it gets any better. We can't keep giving the money for doing nothing.
Right.
All right. Anything else? Anything about the upcoming year? I mean, anything going on that you want to, hawk or talk about before we get off of here?
One of the biggest things we didn't get a chance to talk about, but we have to make sure of is that comprehensive sex education.
Yeah.
We had a bill this last year that just basically said it's all opt-in, and right now it's all opt-out, and did not get a hearing on that one. I think that one's a vital bill that we have to keep pushing this idea that sex and sex education and sexuality is not the job of the schools to be teaching and talking about it. So, so we have to get after that.
And as Monica Klein told us a few weeks ago, she said it is teaching people, it's teaching our kids how to have sex.
Yes.
All different depraved ways, and that's what. And so, can we have a bill that says we're not teaching sex ed in schools? Period. The end.
Yeah, we have both. The reality we have to live with is what can I get passed. So Danny Williams ran the counterpart to that, what you just said, that said there shall be no sex ed. But I couldn't even get a hearing on a bill that says sex ed is opt-in. So what we're trying to play back and forth with is what can we get that effectively shuts it down without it. And so we've got the bills run. It's just a matter of which one can we get and which one can we get the votes for.
Yeah, I would like to whip that and see where the votes are. I want to know. I want to know.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah.
But I think that's the reason why they won't let you run it, though, is for that particular reason. These people don't want to be on the record.
I imagine there's a lot of truth in that. There's a lot of times that votes get taken. They'll tell us it's to protect the caucus. We actually had somebody on the lewd acts bill where we were trying to shut down the drag queen stuff. There was somebody told me that they were protecting the caucus by not hearing that bill. And so, yeah, that's usually the excuse used.
Wow.
So I just wanted to make mention about the comprehensive sex education. This was Rope. This is on Rumble. Monica Klein. It was Rope number 25, Rope report number 25. So if you want to go back and look at that on comprehensive sex education, please go back and look at that. And then also, Senator, you were so sweet to have me do a presentation last summer, yes, on the interim study. So that's on our YouTube channel, so you can go there and find that. So, we're still committed to helping you stop that in whatever way we can do that.
Right.
Yep.
All right. Well, it's almost 1:25. We managed to go way over an hour, didn't we?
Yeah, and
I told you I didn't have anywhere to go.
You've got a date with some fishing buddies, though, right?
The girls, they're going to lose their freedom after today, and so what they wanted to do was go fishing. So we're going to grab the rod and reels and see if we can go fish before it gets too hot.
Oh, I love that.
Great idea.
Well, take us with you when you go. I haven't been fishing in a long time.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on with us today. We always enjoy, whether it's sitting in your office and having these discussions or online presence. We appreciate you.
Yeah,
Well,
no,
and
my pleasure.
I want to say this too. I mean, because I think this is super important before we get off of here. You know, it's clear that we don't agree on everything, you
Sure.
know, but we still like you, and hopefully you still like us, and we can still have
Very much.
discussion. So I think that's got to be the bottom line here. We've got to stop. We do one of two things. We either scream at each other, you know, or we just don't say anything. And neither one of those is productive. But,
Right.
you know, when we can share, and, you know, hopefully you heard some arguments from us that maybe you haven't heard from before, and will, you know, make you think a little bit more about the tax credit thing. But that's the only way we're going to come to any kind of understanding, is being able
Sure.
to have that discussion, not either screaming or saying nothing.
Well, that's correct, and that's one of the things. My door has always been open to people. Now, the sad part is, too many people can't do it without screaming at you.
Yeah.
But I'm always up for this.
Oh, he's gone.
He's there, but he's not there.
No, I think what happened was, we'll give him a second to see if he gets back on, because there he is. There, and I think
somebody tried. Yeah, somebody tried to call my phone. But you know, that's one of the main things is we have to get back to a point where we can sit down, talk the issues out. If we don't agree, fine, let's go get a cup of cappuccino and some barbecue. And we can still have our discussions. So it never has bothered me when people disagree with me. I mean, I'll put it to you this way: I went out and found the smartest person I could find, and I married her, and we don't agree. So that's usually the way that goes down. So I mean, you know, we'll figure it out as we get going.
Yeah. Well, David, thank you again for being with us today, and you and the girls have fun fishing today.
Yes, thanks, ladies. Appreciate y'all.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. That was good. That was a good discussion. Really enjoyed that discussion. It's always good to talk to somebody that you don't agree with, that you can have, you know, a discussion with. And we had 2 comments.
Well, we agree with him on almost everything, but there's just a few big things that, you know, that like school choice.
Yes. Well, and the tax, and I do hope that he will check into finding out if there are, because if there are lobbyists that are involved in making rules about that, then you know, that needs to stop. And I've heard that from numerous fronts. That's not just, you know, I've heard that from numerous people.
Even if he looks into it and they say that they are stopping it, they won't stop it. You know that.
Well,
we have it behind their backs.
We have to hope so. But the thing we really need to do clearly is read the rules and, you know, see what we can find out. So, it's good to see you again.
Always. Oh, yeah. We need to talk about lamb chops, but we'll do that after.
Oh.
Don't let me forget.
That came out of left field. Okay. So we do have Friday. We do have our state auditor and inspector, Cindy Bird, on.
Yes.
And we will be talking about the audit. And as a matter of fact, I have the audit right here. If you would like to go, if you'd like to talk about it with us and you want to read our audit, just Google State Auditor Bird releases federal single audit. And that's what we're going to talk about other things with her too. I mean, what's her job? I was joking the other day with her and I was like, I'll probably do it again on Friday, frankly. And I said something, well, no, it was to her assistant. And I said, well, I'll probably say something like, gosh, I thought girls weren't supposed to do math, and you're the state auditor and inspector. So we'll be talking, you know, with her about other things, but we definitely will be talking about that, because there were some, if you did not read the audit, and I'm not saying it's fun, frankly, and I will warn you that I did scan a lot of it. I didn't go through every single part of it. But the part that I was really interested in was the bridge the gap, stay in school and learn anywhere, the COVID part of the audit. And you can find that on page 48, the gear part. You can find that on page 48 of the audit if you want to go ahead and download to read it, because I do think that you would want to know what's going on there. And I think she'll be happy to give us some update on that. So please make sure you're with us on Friday morning at 9 o'clock in the morning, and we will talk to Cindy Bird. Right. So anything to close us out, Jules?
Nothing new that I know of.
Okay.
Glad to visit with Senator Bullard always. He is a man of honor and integrity, and I appreciate him for being there.
Me too, because I mean, I think the sad thing about it is, like we talked about, when you have the pro tem Greg Treat, who is saying we're not going to run those bills, and you have the speaker, Charles McCall, who's saying we're not going to run these bills. And don't forget that the pro tem and the speaker are the ones who appoint the leaders and members of these.
The committee chairs. Yep.
Yes. And I mean, so when you have a bad session like we had last year where kids just didn't get protected like they should, and I think we forgot to mention, so the library books, none of those bills got passed, but there were rules that the governor allowed the State Department of Education to put in place for that, to help stop the developmentally inappropriate library books. However, still in all, it should be illegal to show, kids information or allow kids to read information.
It is illegal, as we talked to with. It is illegal, as we talked to with Major Flowers. All that needs to happen is a librarian, a principal, and a superintendent go to jail and be labeled sex criminals. Yeah. And then we're done. That will not happen anymore. It just
but the important point, that he was making is that it was Greg Treat and Charles McCall that stopped these bills essentially from getting to the floor. So, it's important to remember that they weren't for protecting children, and it's important to remember that. So, we have on the 16th, we have Brett Farley, who is the head of the Catholic, I've forgotten how Catholic they actually
schools, what is it called?
Yeah, I don't remember what it is, but we're going to talk to him about the controversy, and it is that about giving public money to private schools, private Catholic schools. We're going to talk about that. Then we're going to talk to my favorite editor, Joy Pullman, at the Federalist, and we're going to talk to her about several different things about what they do for their kids for school, and Common Core, and how that's affected education in America today. We still have, we're waiting on to fill up the 23rd, but on the 25th, we're going to have local film. They are now doing documentaries, Janelle and Kevin Batts. And we're going to have Janelle on to talk. And then on the 30th, we're going to have longtime Oklahoma resident, now a Kansas resident, Denise Roberts, who's going to talk about why she ended up taking her kids out of public school in Kansas. And it's a fascinating, fascinating story that every parent needs to see, because she actually, while we were saying, look, these counselors can counsel your kids without your permission, this did happen to her, and it was with some really terrible results. So you want to pay attention to that one. And then on September 1st, we're going to have September 6th, we're going to have Alex Newman, who's going to talk about his book, Crimes of the Educators. And then on the 8th, we're going to have Teresa Mall, who's going to talk to us about how to woke-proof our life, including how to educate our kids. So we've got a great show. We've got great shows lined out for you. So please make sure you follow along and stay tuned either on Rumble or YouTube, or you can see us on Facebook at X Live.
Yes.
I like saying that. It's not Twitter anymore, but it's X.
I will
All right.
never recall that.
I know. It's going to be hard to move it from Twitter to X, I think.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we enjoyed having everybody with us today. Thank you again for tuning in to us. If you've ever got any suggestions for who you'd like to see us have on the show, please make sure you send those to us so that we can work on getting them on. Anything else, Jules, other than...
That's all I can think of. I'll call somebody today and get them set for the 23rd. I thought we had that filled, but...
No, I don't. Well, maybe we better check.
We better check.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I guess we'll sign off for today. And thanks for sticking with us for an hour and 35 minutes. And we'll see you again on Friday. Thanks a lot.